Oh look, another video where he's got magazines that he used to read as a kid. Being a ZX Spectrum kid when I was growing up, I had two go-to magazines. Those were Crash and Your Sinclair. Occasionally, Sinclair User popped up as well, if they had the right cover tape or a cover that I quite like the look of. Whether it was the Oliver Frey artwork or some other justifiable reason a cover got my attention, it was nearly always one of these three once every month. Occasionally I would want more, or maybe I was feeling flush or just plain bored and needed an excuse to go on a bike ride to a different set of local shops that included the newsagents, and I would find myself looking at other magazines. No, not those magazines. I mean, I was never going to pick up Zap or Amstrad Action, was I? But this one in particular sometimes caught my eye. Not only did C&VG have lots of other systems in it so I could see what I was missing out on, but it had specky stuff too. It even showed arcade games, so it always had something of interest to 12-year-old me. What always struck me about C&VG though, even then, was its rather generous scoring. They always seemed to give even mediocre games 70% or equivalent. Rarely, and I mean very rarely, did a game get lower than a 25% score. If it did, you knew it was truly horrendous. Did they have too many to review so they couldn't give proper games a go? Who knows? So I started to trawl through every bloody issue from 1981 right up to the end of 1989 to see how many games out of the hundreds, if not thousands they reviewed, got a bad score. And yeah, there were not many. In fact, from my count, just 13 games got less than 20%. So I thought to myself, this would make an interesting video. And spoiler alert, but the number one game got this score. So join me as I count down the 20 worst games in the 80s according to C&VG magazine. And why number one, which is a crap game but not that crap, scored so terribly. Now, I'm not reviewing them this time. I'll let reviewers back in the day give their reasons for the hatred. Let's see if you agree or not, with some quite interesting takes. Number 20, Mount Vesuvius. Tynesoft, Commodore 16, 1985. I'm glad Tynesoft kicks us off, as they surely needed rewarding for all the hard work they put in for ripping off kids with shit games over the 1980s, and this one is no exception. The reviewer had high hopes. I had expected erupting volcanoes and exploding lava to be prominent features here, but it was not to be. There is indeed a volcano and the locals are in danger of being erupted on. Take your helicopter and rescue 5 passengers at a time before your fuel rapidly runs out. Repeat this procedure until you are bored. The graphics are pretty primitive and the screen scrolls in jerks. This game is the pits. Good old Tynesoft. Number 19, Hyperdome, Exocet Software, Atari ST, 1988. The reviewer starts as he means to go on here, and you get a sense he was fairly exasperated after spending time with this game. Having played Hyperdome extensively, I'm still undecided as to whether I'm doing it properly or not. It's supposed to be a progressive scroller with double fire, missiles, assault shells, homing missiles, and droids up for grabs. But try as I might, I couldn't seem to collect anything except a slightly longer bullet and a fairly useless satellite. The graphics are so basic you'd be forgiven for mistaking this for a C64 budget shoot-'em-up. What you've got here is an ugly, ear-scraping, slow and boring shoot-'em-up without so much as one notable feature. And to round it all off, play stops unnecessarily to allow disk access. This is probably the first game I have ever played where I complained that I was starting with too many lives. If software shops haven't already got bargain bins for 16-bit software, this could be a good reason to start one. Number 18, Kellogg's Tour, CRL, Commodore 64, 1988. Tony Dillon reviews this one, and I'm not sure he's a fan of breakfast cereals or bandwagons for that matter. Now, there is a new bandwagon for software companies to clamber onto. First, there was the official coin-up bandwagon, then there was the officially endorsed by a famous and well-loved sports personality bandwagon. Now, there's the make it about a breakfast cereal fad. The best way to describe this game is it's a cross between Milk Race and the cycling event in Summer Games 2, though not a patch on either. The problem is that there's no variation. Even the hills are only represented by a sloper graph thingy at the bottom of the screen. Maybe I can stick it for a stage or two, but for 6, forget it. Boredom City. Add graphics that would have embarrassed a VIC-20 and you've not got much of a game. This goes against everything Kellogg's has ever stood for. You know what I mean? Life, sunshine, happiness, smiling families. Still, if this game sends you to sleep, you can always have a sunny bowl of cornflakes when you wake up. Number 17. Go to Hell, 666, ZX Spectrum, 1985. Go to Hell didn't scare our reviewer in the way it was meant to, that's for sure. The blurb for this game says it's unbelievably difficult. Well, that's true. It also says the game will tax almost every reflex you have ever imagined you had. Well, it only taxed my patience. The basic idea is to save your best friend from hell by collecting the power from 7 crosses and confronting the devil in his lair. The graphics are crude and the sound even worse. I found it difficult to play and ended up wondering why I was bothering. The best thing about this game, apart from the packaging, is the animated intro screen showing an evil-looking monk who blinks at you. If Go to Hell is an attempt at producing a controversial game that your mother wouldn't like, then it fails. Even bad taste software has to have style, and at least you know where to send it. Number 16. Lazer Tag. Go label, Commodore 64, 1987. Now, I'm not sure the new American laser tag craze that is supposedly sweeping the nation has enamoured our reviewer here, but surely with Probe on board, it will be a good game, eh? A bit like primary school playground war where you surprise your enemy with an imaginary gun, shout bang and he's dead, except now the game takes place in a futuristic set and your gun uses micro beams to register direct hits on recorder devices. So how does that work as a computer game? Well, not very well, has to be the first and most glaringly obvious observation about this game. It was programmed for Go by development house Probe, who were also incidentally responsible for a number of Outrun conversions. What we have here is game design that was only half thought out and an implementation only partially carried through. This would have received a lukewarm reception as a budget title, but at 10 quid, our advice is to avoid it like the plague. This is an unfortunate release for Go, as they do have some excellent other titles about to be launched, such as Bionic Commandos and Wizard Wars. Lazer Tag, however, is the dog in the pack. Woof. Number 15. Turbo Esprit, Durrell Software, on the Encore label, on the Commodore 64, 1986. Now on the same page we have 87% here for the ZX Spectrum re-release of Turbo Esprit, so what on earth happened on the Commodore 64? Well, at least the reviewer starts with quite possibly the best description of this game ever. Imagine Miami Vice in Milton Keynes and you've got the idea of Turbo Esprit. As a drugs cop, you've got to race through the 3D streets to intercept the cars of drug peddlers which are converging on an armoured truck. Shoot the crims, hit the cars for points, but be careful not to injure innocent bystanders or you will incur hefty penalties. On the Spectrum, the control you have over the car, you can even do 3-point turns, and the dark city streets give this game a very realistic atmosphere, and it's really, really addictive. Unfortunately, the C64 is of nowhere near the same standard. It's slow, jerky, and graphically awful. So best to give this one a miss. Number 14, Game Over 2, Dynamic on the Atari ST, 1988. This was reviewed in conjunction with a somewhat higher scoring Amstrad version, and Matt, our reviewer here, found this a hugely disappointing game as a 16-bit one. After the nice title screen, we're straight into the action with a bang as we approach the enemy prison planet. Two sorts of aliens approach, those that fire back at you and those that swirl around the screen, as well as a number of asteroids. Unfortunately, your ship will insist on drifting back to the left of the screen at every opportunity, leaving you very vulnerable to incomings from the left, amid shouts of "that came nowhere near me" that could be heard to echo around the office. It's down the tunnels and into the planet next for 3 minutes of the worst R-Type clone I've ever seen. This hardly bears writing about, except to say that on the Amstrad the snakes die very easily and you should be able to get through without losing a life, whilst the ST features the world's worst collision detection. Woe betide you if you dare venture anywhere near the top of the screen. The whole thing is laughably bad on the ST, no wonder they haven't bothered with it on the Amiga, but the 8-bit package is generous, and while it won't set the world on fire, it could be a wise purchase. So 8-bit good, 16-bit bad. Number 13, Streetfighter, Capcom and the Go label, Atari ST, 1988. Our Julian reviews this one, finds the game far too easy, not very macho, and puts down a very credible argument for reasons not to buy it, which didn't even include the fact that it was developed by Tiertex. When I saw screenshots of the 16-bit versions, I was expecting great things. The sprites and the backdrops looked almost identical to the coin-up. However, all expectations were dashed as soon as they started moving. Although the sprites are nicely drawn, the animation on both the Amiga and ST is appallingly bad, with huge gaps between frames resulting in a spasmodic and totally unrealistic effect. The fighters mince about in a very unmacho fashion, and the backdrops jerk rather than scroll. That could be forgiven if the game was fun, but no. Either Go has grossly underestimated the ability of the average games player, or didn't bother to playtest the game. Streetfighter is unbelievably easy, especially when you discover that the crouching punch, accessed by pressing fire and moving the joystick diagonally downwards, defeats 9 of the 10 fighters without them actually being able to touch you. If you went and put 20 quid, or 25 quid if you're an Amiga owner, into a Streetfighter coin-up, you'd more than likely be sick of the sight of the machine before you'd used up all your credits. So why spend that much on an unchallenging and incompetent computer version which has no lasting appeal whatsoever? Good point, Julian. Number 12, Harrier Attack on the Encore label, Commodore 64, 1989. Now I was about to get angry and steal a DeLorean so I could go back in time and write a C&VG. How dare you give Harrier Attack 90%? I loved that game. But then I calmed down because Encore were cheeky enough to release this 5 years after its initial release, pretty much a lifetime in the 8-bit space, and the Commodore version was shit. And to be fair, the other versions didn't age too well either. So I'll let them off. What made Harrier Attack so successful in its day was its deceptively simple gameplay, plus the fact that there weren't that many games around at the time. Fortunately, time waits for no tin of peas. And looking at the game in 1989, and it's very disappointing. Awful, juddery scrolling, titchy user-defined graphics, dodgy sound effects, and lousy playability may have been acceptable back in those early 80s, but now, take it away please. Number 11, Guerilla War, Imagine, Commodore 64, 1989. Now, I've had the misfortune of playing this one, and yeah, it is massively crap. It did only get 23% for the other version reviewed here, so could have made the chart twice, but we went for the lowest scoring on the Commodore 64. Hurrah! This was one of my favourite coin-ups this year, so the news that the conversion was in Imagine's capable hands pleased me no end. But what a surprise I was in for. Firstly, the graphics are so indistinct that it took a couple of seconds before I knew which way the character was facing, and you can't hang around for a couple of seconds in a game like this. Ugh, one life lost. The next character appears and it's off towards the enemy at last. The trouble is that the player is so small that you don't know if there's anyone ahead of you until it's too late. Ah, second life gone. Back to the start again. And it's a few minutes later, I'm actually in a tank and steaming off through the jungle. What's this approaching? It's only a foot soldier with a gun, no problem. Boom! Third and final life up the spout. How can that happen? My tank has been destroyed after approximately 1.5 picoseconds by a foot soldier. It's been a long time since an Imagine product has disappointed me to this degree. A perfectly playable and entertaining co-op has been chewed up and spat out as a flickering and stuttering mess. If you really want a game of this type, then check out Victory Road. It can only be better. Can it though? Number 10, Artura, Gremlin Graphics, Atari ST, 1988. And after playing this game myself and reading the review, I think Kieran's got a point here. Try as I might, I couldn't find anything about Arturo to recommend. The graphics are awful, the gameplay is seriously dated, the levels are so similar, the landscape is too confusing, and no spark of interest is generated at any point. This next little piece may sound like it should be shouted out from Speaker's Corner on a Sunday afternoon, but I really believe the software publishers shouldn't release games like this. Computer hardware has developed in leaps and bounds over the last 2 years, and as a sort of knock-on effect, 8-bit games have improved beyond recognition in the same time. To my mind, there is no excuse whatsoever for taking what is already a substandard 8-bit game and converting it upwards. I'm going to have one last try at thinking of something nice to say about Arturo. The cover artwork is nice. Number 9. Core, Christine Computers, the TI-99 in 1984. Well, a channel first. I could not find any footage of this game or any way to play it via emulation. Whether it was never released or just had a small release batch that has been lost forever, who knows. So we just have to go on the review and what that says, and we'll play another TI basic game called Rescuer. The game is written in TI Basic and it shows. The scrolling movement of the screen is slow and jerky, and all the graphics are in stunning black and white. The theme of the game is extremely old and very boring. We reckon you'd do better to program in one of those listings you'll find in C&VG and save your money. Well, it sounds like it's probably best forgotten then. Sorry, Christine. But as for Rescuer, I quite liked it. Number 8. Booty. Firebird. Commodore 16, 1986. So, by the time the C16 version came along, we were surely sick of this game on every other system. So, what about the C16 version then? Well, for a start, Jim is so microscopic. How do the pirates even see him? The music is terrible. In short and simple terms, Booty on the C16 is terrible. Good old John F. Kane, who wrote the original version, which was brilliant, should have got someone good to convert it. While I'm saying all this, let me add that I thought the C64 version was terrible as well, the only good version being on the ZX Spectrum. Booty was a good game and still is, but not on any Commodores. Don't buy it. It's not even worth $1.99. No Booty for you then. Number 7. Knight Rider, Ocean Software, on the Amstrad CPC, 1986. Ah yes, possibly the final nail in the coffin for Ocean to rely on crappy third-party software houses that would promise the world and deliver an egg. And this was a particularly stinky egg. There are 2 parts to this alleged game. Neither are very good. Ocean had a real cheek asking full price for something which C&VG would hammer even if it was a budget offering. It's a shame, as Michael Knight and his computerised supercar kit are terrific subjects for a game, but this effort is just awful. It looks as if someone has dug deep into their file of ZX81 games and dug out an old driving game. The graphics are extremely basic and uninteresting, as is the game itself. I tried hard to find something nice to say about the game. After all, we've all been waiting a long time for it to arrive. But I'm afraid I couldn't find any redeeming features. Don't waste your money on this. If you want to see it, go along to your local computer store and have a few laughs. To be fair, it is really shit. Number 6. Falklands 82 PSS on the ZX Spectrum 1986. And I think this is a combination of being a crap game and just a tad too soon after the Falklands conflict, which tipped this reviewer right over the edge. This game was put out before much of the research on the Falklands had been published, and as a result some details, notably the Argentine order of battle, are slightly wrong. But this is nothing compared to the errors in the overall conception of the game. This complete disregard of realism would not matter so much if the playing mechanism was a good one. In fact, it's slow-moving and unimaginative, with the battalions behaving like chess pieces. I wish I could find something good to say about this game. 4 or 5 years ago it would have been a remarkable programming achievement. As it stands, it's an insult, not only to anyone who buys it, but to those who fought in the Falklands War. Number 5. BMX Racers, Mastertronic, Commodore 64 in 1984. Now, I did wonder if any of the original Mastertronic titles would make this video, and I'm happy to report, yes they did, with one of the worst for the Commodore 64 picked at random it seems, to see what this new budget craze was all about. They did have the name wrong here, as this turned out to be good old BMX Racers. Several companies have jumped on the cheap games bandwagon, though the first to make any impact on the C&VG top 30 is Mastertronic. Mastertronic have more than 20 games on offer at $1.99 each for all the popular micros. We decided to sample the games on offer. First out the bag was BMX Bike Rider for the Commodore 64. Great, I thought, not being averse to the odd wheelie whenever I get my brother to play on the computer for long enough. Now, we all know that BMX bikes are great fun, right? And computer games are great fun too, right? So combining the two should be a win combination, right? Wrong. This game has got to rate as the biggest flop with the C&VG review team since hedgehog flavoured crisps. Do you remember them? That is a memory unlocked there. Do you remember them?
This week also sees the official national launch of a new flavour of potato crisp, hedgehog flavour. Not, we think, made of real hedgehog, fortunately.
All this game is a very third-rate race game showing an aerial view of a front wheel that wiggles. The only thing BMX-ish about it is the title. All you have to do is dodge the other rider, a car, and a loony who fires his gun at you. You could do it with your eyes shut, not that you'd want to. If you've got $1.99 to spare, just think for a moment about all the other things you could buy with it. 2 C&VG magazines, a nice lolly a day for a fortnight, or even half a Culture Club LP. Number 4. NATO Assault Course, CRL, on the Commodore 64, 1988. Surely just a take on the combat school genre of gaming, no? What's not to like? Well, quite a lot apparently. Now, I won't beat around the bush. NATO Assault Course is without doubt one of the worst games I've ever played. If you imagine the Assault Course from Combat School but 100 times longer, with pitiful graphics and restricted gameplay, you'll have some idea of what NATO Assault Course is like. The game's graphics look like they've seeped out of a 3-year-old budget game. The soldier sprites are so badly defined they look like hunchbacks, and the abysmal animation only serves to make things worse, as the soldiers waddle along at snail's pace. The backdrops are extremely chunky and very repetitive in design, so you get the impression you just keep running over the same bit of course endlessly. The courses are far too long to be realistic, and even after 5 minutes of furious waggling, there's no indication on how far you are to come in to complete it. The whole game seems to be a bodged job, and the way that the screen blanks out rather than bothering to scroll the course backwards when you die proves this. NATO Assault Course rates as one of the worst games of the year, and certainly doesn't warrant its price tag. Steer well clear if you value your dosh. At least Specky and Amstrad owners will be spared it. Kinda want to play it now. Number 3, Hotshot by Prism/Addictive on the Commodore 64, 1988. Our mate Julian starts with explaining the game to quite a length, some futuristic ball catching exercise that sounds all very dull. So let's get to the nitty-gritty and see why he hates this one so much. One of the game's big faults is the control method. Catching the ball is incredibly difficult due to the fiddly control method and weird gravity. The computer opponent is also very tough to beat, and frustration sets in very quickly. Now, all this would be alright if the game was worth persevering with, but unfortunately it isn't. The gameplay just isn't exciting, even in 2-player mode, and frustration soon gives way to boredom. Even if you do stick with it, there's only 5 levels of very similar action. The graphics are very poor indeed, and look as though they've been copied directly from the Spectrum version. To be perfectly honest, I don't think Hotshot would make the grade even as a budget game. At £10, it's vastly overpriced. Avoid it at all costs. Number 2, The Fairy Tale Adventure, Micro Illusions on the Commodore 64 in 1988. So at number 2, and quite possibly the worst game here, and you'll see what I mean in a mo, things have really taken a turn for the worst in this 16-bit downgrade to the C64. Just released is a C64 version of the role-playing game downgraded from the 16-bit original on Amiga and PC. I say downgraded as opposed to converted because although I've not seen the game in its earlier incarnations, I find it hard to believe that any 16-bit game could be as clumsy to play as this version. The object is to rescue a talisman which requires the player to defeat a necromancer. Ugh. And the player, in fact, is called Julian, but should he die during his quest, one of his 2 brothers take over, lose them, and you have to start again. By far the worst feature of the game is the command and control system. Combat as well as movement is by joystick, but the control is too crude to do more than just juggle frantically and hope you just smash your enemy to a pulp. If that is, you can recognise the enemy in time. For characters approaching, there is no way of knowing if they are friend or foe until it's almost too late. Alas, there is also worse to come. Commands from the small on-screen menu can be entered by hitting the appropriate key, but the scanned instructions fail to explain this fully. Often the key hit will produce an entirely unexpected result. A number of commands seem completely unobtainable, and it's difficult to tell whether this is due to bugs in the program, omissions in the instructions, as I suspect a mixture of both. A combination of boring plot, uninteresting graphics, a frustrating command system, and instructions written by an incompetent led me to turn off the C64 before I suffered irreparable brain damage. Yesterday's technology, yesterday's game. What a waste of 2 discs. Yawn. Yeah, I don't want to play that one either. So, what is considered worse than all those games, but is actually not as terrible as some of them? It did only manage 3 out of 10 in your Sinclair, but a slightly better 57% in Crash before they got their letters of complaint and even printed the C&VG review. More on that in a bit. This game was marked down though for its content rather than its gameplay, which appeared to be quite the talking point for a few months. The game was called Ole Toro, which translated means Ole Bull. It came out in 1986 for the ZX Spectrum on the Americana label, and let's hear what Tim had to say about it in the original review. A sick sport becomes a sick game thanks to Spanish dynamic programming people. They've taken their national pastime of butchering bulls in public and turned it into the nastiest piece of software I've seen for some time. Just like the real thing, the idea of the game is to get your little matador to butch the bull in the most artistic manner possible. The people who created this game ought to have their ears chopped off, and US Gold ought to be ashamed of themselves actually releasing it. If you see this one on your shelves at your local computer store, get them to take it off and put it where it belongs, in the bin. It's crude and a barbaric game that should never have been released. Well, not everyone agreed, and funnily enough, a Spanish reader wrote in to moan about the score. The article in question is about the program Ole Toro, which you qualified among other adjectives as sick and nasty. I agree that the practice of bullfighting is wild and outrageous, and I really hate the popular fiesta, but it is unfair that you insult the excellent Spanish programmers of Dynamic. It would be more reasonable to insult the bullfighters, the real and only killers. Here is my question. What is crueler, to kill thousands of Japanese people, Commando, Green Beret, Rambo, etc., or to stick some standards into a bull? Although in agreement about bullfighting, another reader remarked, "Please tell Tim that I thought his review of Ole Toro was absolutely correct. I can't stand this sport and I totally agree with his opinion. However, I think we should have given some indication of the quality of the program, even if the game was based on one of the most sickening aspects of human behaviour." Crash and your Sinclair just took it at face value and played it as a game, which also instigated quite a response, and even got Crash printing the original review by Tim in response to an angry letter basically saying the same thing as our Spanish reader previously. The debate spilled over to another issue before being shut down. I presume Crash had had enough at this point. So was Tim right to score it as he did based on its content, or should he have scored it accordingly but still showed his outrage? For me, I'm somewhere in the middle. I didn't enjoy playing it, and I think there's a big difference between violence towards animals and just mowing down people in an unrealistic war setting. I mean, nobody likes it when the dog dies in a movie, for example, but I would have liked if he did at least comment on some of the aspects of the game. Let me know in the comments, and also let me know if you played any of these stinkers that made our top 20 list here. Also, if this video does well, I might do a 90s version too, which could be a bit of Mega Drive, PlayStation and Nintendo fun. Till then, thanks for the watch, and hopefully I'll see you all on the next one. Bye for now.